Hi, friends. You may believe the story of the Titanic is one of glittering chandeliers and fateful ice. But have you ever paused to wonder what it truly felt like to tread those polished decks on silent paws? To curl in the shadows of her grand staircases, inhaling the salt-kissed air and the faint polish of ambition, while the ship's heart thrummed with secrets yet untold? I am Whiskers, a humble ship's cat born amid the clamor of Belfast's yards, who glimpsed the birth of a dream that would sail into legend. Tonight, let my whiskers brush against the edges of history, revealing whispers of the unsinkable wonder and the quiet unraveling that followed. Welcome to the Animal Historian, where the echoes of the past come alive through the eyes and paws of those who lived them unspoken. I invite you to settle in, to let your eyelids grow heavy, and allow this tale to cradle you like a gentle swell on calm seas. If these journeys through animal history and sleep stories soothe your soul, please remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell so you never miss our next whisper into historical animal stories. I'd love to hear where you're listening from tonight, perhaps curled by a fireside in London or under starry skies in New York. Share it in the comments below and tell me, dear friends, which animal's story calls to you next. Now, let's begin. It was a misty dawn in the spring of 1910, or so my mother told me in those first hazy days of warmth and milk-scented fur. Belfast, that industrious heartbeat of Ireland's shipbuilding soul, where the River Lagan whispered secrets to the sea beyond. Harland and Wolff's yards stretched like a labyrinth of iron dreams, a place where men in flat caps and woolen vests bent to the rhythm of hammers and rivet guns, forging behemoths from the earth's own bones. I remember it not as chaos, but as a lullaby of creation, the steady clang-clang of metal kissing metal, like the distant tolling of church bells calling the faithful to prayer. The air hung heavy with the tang of coal smoke, and wet timber mingled with the earthy sharpness of horse dung from the dray carts hauling steel plates. And beneath it all, the faint, briny promise of the ocean carried on winds that tugged at my tiny, sealed ears. My mother, a sleek tabby named Shadow, by the yard workers who tossed her scraps of salted fish, had claimed a nook in the shadow of the skeletal frames rising from the slipways. She was no ordinary stray. She was a guardian of the grain stores, her paws patrolling the warehouses where sacks of flour and barrels of provisions waited to feed the crews of ships yet unborn. Shadow had come to Belfast from the wild hedges of County Down, her coat scarred from scraps with rats bolder than barn owls. But in those yards, she found purpose, a velvet shadow slipping between the legs of riveters, her green eyes gleaming like emeralds in the gaslight. It was there, amid the cradle of what would one day be called the Olympic-class liners, that she birthed me and my 3 siblings on a damp April morning. The date? The 12th, I believe. Though calendars meant little to us then, time was measured in the rise of fog and the fall of rain. I emerged last, the runt of the litter, my fur a patchwork of silver and black, like moonlight spilled on coal dust. Mother licked us clean with a tongue rough as burlap, her purr a steady vibration that chased away the chill. We nestled into her belly, blind and mewling, while around us the yards pulsed with life. Men shouted in thick Ulster accents, "Pass the plate, lads," or "Mind the swing," their boots thudding like distant thunder. The scent of their sweat-soaked flannel, mixed with machine oil, a heady brew that would become as familiar to me as mother's milk. I learned to listen, before I could see. The hiss of welding torches, the creak of scaffolding, swaying in the breeze off Belfast Lough. By the time my eyes fluttered open, at 3 weeks, the yard had become my playground. Crawling from the basket on stubby legs, I discovered the joy of pouncing on the shadows cast by arc lamps, my paws sinking into sawdust that smelled of pine resin and forgotten forests. My siblings tumbled after, our tiny claws scratching symphonies on the wooden planking. But Belfast was no gentle nursery. The yards employed over 15,000 souls. By 1910, a hive of ambition driven by the White Star Line's fierce rivalry with Cunard's Lusitania and Mauritania. J. Bruce Ismay, the line's chairman, envisioned his new trio, Olympic, Titanic, and the yet-to-be-laid Britannic, not just as vessels, but as floating palaces to reclaim the blue riband of the Atlantic. Olympic's keel had broken ground in December 1908, her massive form already dwarfing the slipways when I drew my first breath. Titanic's turn came soon after, on March 31st, 1909, a day of fanfare with brass bands and top-hatted dignitaries toasting the future. I didn't witness the ceremony, too young, too tucked away, but I felt its echo in the sudden surge of workers, their laughter booming like waves against the quay. The air grew thicker with the acrid bite of flux from the forges, where steel plates, each weighing up to 30 tons, were heated to glowing orange before being hammered into shape. One lesser-known whisper from those founding days, the yard's designers, led by Thomas Andrews, incorporated a revolutionary double-bottom hull and 16 watertight compartments, touted as making the ships practically unsinkable. Yet, in the quiet corners where cats gathered, we heard murmurs from the platers. Men like my friend Tommy, a wiry lad with hands blackened by soot. He'd sneak us milk from his flask, scratching behind my ears with calloused fingers that smelled of tobacco and tar. "Lad's a beauty, this one," he'd say of Titanic's frame, but then lean in close, voice dropping. "They skimped on the rivets in the bow, you know? Cheaper wrought iron instead of steel up forward, and the bulkheads don't quite reach the top. Could spill over like a teacup if she's holed bad." It was idle talk then, the kind shared over pints at the Crown Liquor Saloon after shifts, but it lingered in my whiskers like a chill draft. Tommy didn't know it, but those words were seeds of a truth that would bloom in ice-choked waters years hence. As spring unfolded into summer, my siblings and I grew bold. We scampered along the catwalks high above the slipways, the wind whipping our fur like invisible hands. From there, I first beheld Titanic's skeleton, a colossal ribcage of steel girders arching against the sky, 882 feet from astern to prow, longer than the Waterloo railway station. The workers swarmed like ants, sparks flying from pneumatic hammers in golden showers that danced like fireflies. I chased one such spark once, tumbling headlong into a coil of hemp rope, its fibers coarse and salty from the docks. Mother scolded me with a cuff of her paw, but her eyes held pride. We were yard-born, wild hearts tempered by industry. We honed our skills on the vermin that plagued the site, rats as bold as pirates, their eyes red as embers, gnawing at insulation meant for the engines. My first kill came on a fog-shrouded June eve, the air thick with the scent of blooming gorse from the hills. The rat was fat, emboldened by the endless feast of discarded rivets and bread crusts. I stalked it along a beam, my belly low, heart a soft drum in my chest. The pounce was instinct, claws sinking into fur slick as oil. Its squeal was brief, silenced by my bite. A moment of fierce joy, warm blood on my tongue like iron rain. That summer of 1910 brought changes to the yards, ripples from the wider world. King Edward VII had passed in May, ushering in George V's reign, and the air buzzed with talk of empire and progress. But beneath the pomp, tensions simmered. The shipwrights, carpenters, and boilermakers, many Catholic in a Protestant stronghold, whispered of unions and fair wages. A small strike flickered in July over piecework rates, halting riveters for a day. I remember the unnatural quiet, broken only by gulls and the lap of the lagan. Mother sheltered us in a boiler drum, its metal still warm from the forges, while outside, foremen paced with clipboards, voices low. "Back to it, lads." Ismay's breathing down our necks for the launch. It passed quickly, but it taught me the fragility of human endeavors, how a single withheld hammer could stall a giant's birth. By autumn, my littermates had scattered. One, a bold Ginger Tom, was adopted by a plater's family in the Shipyard terraces, vanishing into the maze of terraced houses along Duncrew Street. Another fell to a passing cart's wheel, cruel fate, swift as a shadow. The third, my sister Speckle, stayed close, her calico coat a camouflage among the rusting scaffolds. We roamed together, leaping from crate to crate, inhaling the symphony of scents, the sweet malt from nearby distilleries, the fishy reek from the docks where trawlers unloaded cod by the barrel. Evenings found us curled on sun-warmed rivet boxes, watching the sunset paint the Antrim hills in hues of rose and amber. The rhythm of the yards lulled me, the thud-thud of caulking mallets driving oakum into seams, the whoosh of chain hoists lifting propeller shafts that weighed as much as an elephant. Winter came softly that year, snowflakes drifting like errant cotton wisps onto the decks under construction. Titanic's hull was taking shape, her double skin curving gracefully, but progress was a jealous lover, a lesser-known hiccup from those months. In December 1910, a fierce gale battered Belfast, toppling scaffolding and delaying the fitting of her propeller posts. I huddled with Speckle in a tarpaulin lean-to, the wind howling like a banshee through the yards, carrying the salt spray from the loft. Mother had grown leaner, her hunts yielding less in the cold, so we learned to beg from the boilermakers, scraps of corned beef from their tiffin boxes, warm and savory. One worker, an old salt named Patrick, fashioned us collars from leather scraps, etched with H&W Vermin Patrol. He chuckled, his beard frosted white. "You're the real bosses here, cats. Keep the black devils at bay, and we'll keep the ships afloat." Little did he know how prophetic that jest would ring. As 1911 dawned, the yards thrummed with renewed vigor. Olympic, Titanic's elder sister, was nearing completion, her funnels rising like cathedral spires. On May 31st, Titanic herself slid into the water, a spectacle that shook the earth like a god's footfall. I was there, perched on a beam with Speckle. The crowd's roar, a tidal wave of sound crashing against my fur. Champagne bottles shattered against her prow in a fizzy cascade, and she eased stern first into the fitting-out basin, displacing water in a frothy bow wave that soaked the cheering throngs. The scent was intoxicating, fresh varnish on her planking, the metallic tang of paint, and beneath it, the deep, oceanic musk of her hull, kissing the lagan for the first time. Mother watched from afar, her tail twitching, pride, perhaps, or the instinct of one who knew the sea's fickle heart. In the months that followed, as Titanic lay in the basin for her outfitting, I grew into my role. Speckle and I became inseparable scouts, patrolling the holds where electricians strung miles of wiring for her 10,000 light bulbs, enough to rival a city skyline. We chased rats through the echoing galleys, their nests woven from discarded blueprints. One secret from those shadowed spaces, the ship's bakeries were stocked with experimental luxuries, like a French pâtissier testing recipes for iced puddings flavored with violet and cherry. I'd sneak licks from cooling trays when the cooks turned away, the cream smooth as moonlight on my tongue. But humans in their hurried ways overlooked the omens. Whispers among the fitters spoke of a cursed Egyptian mummy crate aboard, actually a wooden sarcophagus ordered by a collector, but rumor spun it into a harbinger of doom. "Bad luck that," Tommy muttered one night, tossing me a fish head. Eyes like death itself. I paid it no mind. Curses were for two-leggers, bound by their superstitions. We cats trusted our whiskers, which tingled not from wood and myth, but from the subtle shifts in the air, the way the wind off the loft carried a sharper edge, hinting at storms unborn. Spring 1912 brought farewells. Mother, ever the wanderer, vanished one equinox night, her scent fading like mist at dawn. Speckle met a kinder end, claimed by a kindly stewardess on Olympic as that ship prepared for her own maiden crossing in June 1911. I was alone now, a year-old Tom with a notched ear from a rival's claw, my coat sleek from good hunts. The yards, once my cradle, felt confining as Titanic's completion neared. On March 31st, she was officially finished, her interiors a marvel of Edwardian opulence, paneled walls of mahogany and sycamore, crystal chandeliers dangling like frozen waterfalls. But I sensed the pull of the sea, stronger now, like a siren's call woven into the creak of her timbers. It was during the sea trials on April 2nd that fate coiled her tail around me. Titanic steamed out of Belfast Lough into the Irish Sea, her engines humming a deep, resonant song that vibrated through my paws. Engineers tested her speed up to 23 knots, they crowed. A lesser-known quirk from those trials, a small fire broke out in a paint locker, quickly doused, but it left a smoky tang that clung to the bulkheads for days. As the ship danced through choppy waves, I felt her spirit, alive, buoyant, a creature of steel and steam, yearning for the horizon. Returning to Belfast that evening, the chief engineer, a gruff man named Bell, spotted me amid the stores. "A mouser, eh? We'll need you for the rats on the crossing." And so, with a crate of straw and a saucer of milk, I was bound for Southampton, the port where dreams set sail. The journey south was a blur of rattling trains and horse-drawn drays, the English countryside unfolding in greens softer than Irish moss. Southampton's docks assaulted my senses, the clamor of cranes unloading cotton bales from America, the fishy reek of the Test River mingling with spices from India-bound freighters. Titanic lay there, moored at berth 44, her 4 funnels towering like sentinels, though only 3 would belch smoke, the 4th a mere vent for show, to balance her silhouette against Olympic's grace. I was carried aboard by a quartermaster, deposited in the baggage hold, amid trunks bound for New York's glitter. But freedom called. That first night, I slipped my bonds, padding through corridors, lit by soft Marconi lamps. The air hummed with polish and fresh linen, the grand staircase spiraling upward like a gilded dream. Little did I know, as I curled in a coil of rope on April 9th, That tomorrow, April 10th, the anchors would weigh, and the ship of dreams would chase the sun across the Atlantic. The yards of my berth felt a world away, yet their echoes lingered in every rivet, every plank. But peace, like a calm sea, is fleeting, and in the salt wind, I caught the first faint chill of what lay ahead. The morning of April the 10th, 1912, dawned crisp over Southampton water, the sun a pale disk, filtering through veils of mist that clung to the Solent like a lover's breath. I stirred in my coil of rope within the shadowed recesses of the baggage hold. The ship's gentle rock, a cradle's sway, far removed from the Belfast gales that had once tousled my fur. The air down here was a tapestry of scents, the musty wool of packed steamer trunks, the faint citrus tang of imported oranges stacked in crates from Valencia, and the underlying brine that seeped through the hull like an old friend's whisper. Above, the decks thrummed with anticipation, a low hum of voices and footsteps that vibrated through the planking into my bones. Titanic was alive, her steel heart beating steady, ready to unfurl her sails, though sails she had none, only the invisible wings of steam propelling her toward the open sea. As the noon hour approached, I ventured upward, slipping through a half-open hatch like smoke through fingers. The corridors below decks were a warren of service passages, lit by the soft glow of electric bulbs that cast long shadows, dancing like playful phantoms. Stewards in crisp white jackets bustled past, their shoes polished to a gleam, carrying trays laden with crystal glasses tinkling like wind chimes. One paused, a young man named Alfred, his face boyish under a mop of auburn hair. He was a pantry boy, tasked with stocking the saloons with Wedgwood china and silver cutlery monogrammed with the White Star burgee. Spotting my silver-black form weaving between his ankles, he chuckled softly, a sound like the rustle of starched linen. Ah, the mouser then. Jenny's successor, they say. He didn't know my name. Whiskers was mine alone. But he offered a saucer of milk, flecked with bits of smoked herring, warm from the galley fires. I lapped it gratefully, the cream sliding smooth as silk down my throat, while he murmured of the day's excitement. Full house today, Cat. Millionaires and maids alike, all chasing the horizon. Truth be told, Jenny had been the queen before me, the sleek black ship's cat transferred from Olympic after her own kits were weaned and rehomed during those Belfast trials. Legends swirled around her like fog, tales of her leaping ashore at Southampton with a hiss, as if sensing the chill fate ahead. But those were sailors' yarns, spun over pipes and porter to ward off the night's unease. Jenny had stayed aboard, they said, curling in the breadroom as always, her green eyes watchful over the rising dough. But she vanished in the chaos to come, leaving her post to wanderers like me. I claimed it without fanfare, patrolling the holds where rats rustled like dry leaves in autumn winds, their beady eyes glinting from nests woven into burlap sacks of flour. At precisely 12 noon, the mooring lines groaned free, and Titanic eased from berth 44 with a dignity that belied her might. Captain Edward J. Smith, a veteran of 40 years at sea, with a beard like hoarfrost on oak, stood on the bridge, his voice calm as he ordered half ahead both. The twin screws churned the water to froth, a white wake unfurling behind us like a bridal train. From my perch on a ventilator cowl, I watched the shore recede, the red brick warehouses of Ocean Dock, the flutter of handkerchiefs from well-wishers clustered on the pier. But joy soured swiftly as we swung into the channel, The wake from our passing tugged at the moored liner New York, snapping her lines with a crack like thunder. She lurched free, drifting perilously into our path, her hull a looming shadow in the narrow fairway. Gasps rose from the crowds on shore, a collective intake like the sea drawing breath. Engines reversed in a frantic ballet, the vibration shuddering through my paws, and inches from collision, New York was hauled back by tugs. Whistles hooted in relief, but in the crew's mess below, whispers spread like oil on water, an ill omen on the maiden day, a ship's near kiss with disaster before the ocean had even tasted her keel. Alfred found me laters, stroking my back with trembling fingers. Close shave, eh, Whiskers? The old salts are crossing themselves already. We steamed on, the Solent yielding to the broader sweep of the English Channel, the air growing sharper with each league. Southampton had disgorged her cargo of souls, 2,208 in all, though the ship could hold twice that, her berths half empty, like a feast prepared for ghosts. First class glittered with the elite. John Jacob Astor Forth, the richest man afloat, with his young bride Madeline. Benjamin Guggenheim, mining magnate, pockets lined with radium ore samples. And Isidore Strauss of Macy's fame, arm in arm with his devoted Ida. They promenaded the boat deck, parasols twirling like petals in a breeze, inhaling the salt-laced wind that carried hints of French chalk from the approaching coast. I slunk among them unseen, my paws silent on the teak planking, warmed by the sun, catching drifts of their perfumes, jasmine and vetiver, mingling with the leather of fine luggage. Below, in the labyrinth of second and third class, life pulsed with quieter rhythms. Irish emigrants from the Southampton slums filled the steerage, their trunks stuffed with rosaries and fiddle strings, dreams of New York's tenements burning bright as the porthole stars. Families like the Sandors from Hungary, huddled in E-deck cabins, sharing tales in lilting tongues over crusts of soda bread, the air thick with the aroma of boiled cabbage from the communal galleys. Children chased one another down the iron stairwells, their laughter echoing like bells in a cloister, while mothers mended hems by the light of swinging lanterns. One little girl, no more than 5, with braids like twisted vines, spotted me once and cooed, "Kitty, come see the big boat fly." She offered a crumb of oatcake, sticky with jam, and I obliged, rubbing against her skirts that smelled of heather and hearth fires left behind. The crew, some 885 strong, moved to the ship's unspoken pulse. Their days were etched in watches. The black gang in the engine rooms, faces smudged with coal dust, stoking the 29 boilers that guzzled 600 tons of coal daily. The heat, a forge's breath, rising to 100 degrees in the stokeholds. Trimmers hauled barrows of anthracite from bunker to furnace, their backs bent like willows in a gale, emerging hourly for gulps of air that tasted of rust and sweat. Up top, the deckhands polished brass until it sang under the sun, the rhythmic swish-swish of chamois cloths, a metronome to the waves. In the galleys, a symphony of 60 chefs orchestrated feasts, roast beef, carved tableside in the a la carte restaurant, where diners savored oysters, Rockefeller under Bohemian crystal, or simpler fare in the third-class dining saloon, where platters of porridge and herring, steamed on long oak tables, served family style with clattering spoons. A lesser-known harmony in that culinary chorus, the daily baking of 12,000 loaves in the bread rooms, where dough rose in massive tins under the watchful eye of the bakers, their aprons dusted white as millers' ghosts. I claimed those rooms as my throne, batting at rising bubbles that popped with yeasty sighs, the warmth seeping into my fur like a sunbeam on wool. One baker, a stout Cornishman named George, would whistle sea shanties as he needed. "What shall we do with a drunken sailor?" His voice a gravelly rumble that set my tail twitching. He'd slip me slivers of crust, golden and crisp, murmuring, "Keeps the rats honest, ya do." Though truth be told, we've a fire in number 6 bunker that's been smoldering since Belfast, 3 days now, and the governors hush it up. That secret fire, a spark from spontaneous coal combustion, had licked at the bulkhead unnoticed during outfitting, only doused fully on the crossing. It weakened the steel forward, a hidden saboteur in the bow, but in those early hours, it was just a faint smoke haze to me, acrid as burnt toast on the galley drafts. As evening draped the ship in indigo, we neared Cherbourg, the Norman coast, a silhouette of cliffs etched against a peach-hued sky. At 6:30 p.m., anchors plunged with a splash like stones in a well, and Titanic lay to in the outer harbor, her lights winking like fireflies across the water. Tenders nomadic in traffic, sturdy White Star launches ferried the elite from the quayside, 274 more souls, including the Princesse de Léon, her tiara, a constellation of diamonds, and French bankers with attaché cases fat with securities. I watched from the rail, the sea a mirror of stars, as figures in fur stoles and tailcoats boarded, their chatter a babel of accents, Parisian lilt and clipped English. One passenger, a widow named Dorothy Gibson, clutched a violin case like a talisman. Little did she know its strings would serenade survivors days hence. The tender's engines chugged softly, their wakes lapping against the hull in gentle kisses, carrying scents of channel oysters and cognac from the shore. By 8 p.m., the last tender returned, and at 8:10, with a quiver of chains, we weighed anchor for Queenstown. The night unfolded like velvet, the ship's band, 8 musicians in dress tails, striking up Alexander's ragtime band on the promenade, notes drifting on the breeze like petals from a rose. Passengers strolled arm in arm, cigar smoke curling lazy spirals, while I prowled the well deck, where steerage folk gathered for impromptu reels. Fiddles scraping merry jigs under the arc of the rigging lights. A secret melody in that revelry, the wireless room, abuzz with Marconi operators, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride tapping out ice warnings from ahead. Bergs sighted by the steamer Rappahannock, flotillas like 1,000 seals on a beach. But Captain Smith filed them away, deeming the path clear. After all, this was his retirement voyage, a swan song of calm seas. Dawn on April 11th broke with a blush of rose over the Irish Sea, the air crisp with the peat scent of the Emerald Isle. I breakfasted on galley scraps, kippers, flaked tender, their oily richness a balm after the night's hunt for a wayward mouse in the squash court baggage. Titanic's amenities were a wonderland for the idle rich. The gymnasium, with mechanical camels and electric horses for healthful exercise. The saltwater swimming pool on F deck, its Turkish bath adjacent, steam rising like genie smoke scented with eucalyptus. Ladies in lace disported there, their splashes a silvery cascade, while gentlemen, like Archibald Butt, White House aide, pedaled stationary bikes, sweat beating on brows furrowed by Washington dispatches. Mid-morning found us at anchor off Queenstown Cove now, but then a bustling hive of emigration. At 11:30 a.m., the harbor, a necklace of fishing boats bobbing like cork. Tender Ireland chugged out thrice, embarking 123 last voyagers, mostly third-class Irish, their blessings murmured in Gaelic as they crossed the gangway, pockets light but hearts heavy with hope for Boston kin. One family, the Burkes from County Cork, pressed a sprig of shamrock into a steward's palm. Another, young Eugene Daly, slung his Willian pipes over his shoulder, their wheeze a farewell to the old sod. I darted between legs, inhaling the earthy whiff of their woolens, sodden from morning mist, mingled with the sharp tang of Guinness from the pierhead pubs. As the tender pulled away at 1:30 p.m., a stoker shouted back, "Godspeed," and the decks fell quiet, save for the lap of waves against the counter. With Queenstown's green hills fading astern, Titanic turned her prow full to the west, engines building to a steady 21 knots. The ocean a vast azure quilt, stitched with whitecaps. Lunch in the first-class saloon was a ritual of excess. Consommé Olga, followed by poached salmon in mousseline sauce, each course announced with a flourish by stewards gliding like shadows. At adjoining tables, 13 honeymoon couples toasted futures bright as the Verrières china. Mr. and Mrs. Goldsmith from London, she in a gown of Irish lace, or the newlyweds Strauss. No, wait, that was the elders. Afternoons blurred into leisure's haze. In the third class, open-air promenades rang with games, shuffleboard mallets thwacking wooden discs across salt-damp courts, children shrieking as quoits clattered on deck. Mothers gossiped over tea, strong as boot leather, served in the lounge with scones, plump with raisins, sharing remedies for seasickness, ginger root grated fine, or a dram of whiskey slipped from the bar. I wove through it all, a gray specter, pausing to groom on a steamer chair abandoned by a dozing banker, the canvas warm and sun-faded. Evenings brought the a la carte's grandeur, caviar in silver bowls, lamb with mint sauce, carved by maître d'hôtel Pierre Rousseau. The air heavy with the sizzle of Chateaubriand on silver-domed platters. Yet beneath the polish, secrets simmered like the bunker fire's embers. The lookouts in the crow's nest, Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee, shivered through 4-hour shifts without binoculars, the pair locked away in a steward's cabin, overlooked in the haste of departure. Eyes sharp, lads, the mate had growled, but the naked gaze strained against the dusk. In the wireless shack, Phillips tapped replies to passengers' banalities. Weather fine, regards to mother, interrupted by urgent berg alerts from the Coronia and Baltic, stacked unread on the rack. And in the boiler rooms, the tramp of trimmers echoed ceaseless, their lamps flickering shadows on sweat-slick walls. Unaware the coal blaze had bowed a plate ever so slightly forward. As the sun dipped on that first full day at sea, April 11th waning into twilight, the band reconvened on the poop deck for a twilight concert, waltzes lilting like waves on sand. Couples swayed, the women's skirts whispering against the rail, while I curled on a lifeboat cover, the canvas rough under my chin, lulled by the melody. A young third-class lad, reading Dickens by porthole light, murmured to his sister, "This ship's a palace. Nora, no more peat smoke and tatties." But in the deepening blue, my whiskers quivered, a subtle chill on the breeze. Not just night's approach, but something colder, adrift from the Labrador current. The sea, ever the deceiver, smiled serene, yet I felt her stir, a distant rumble like thunder over ice fields unborn. As the twilight of April 11th melted into the velvet dark, Titanic pressed onward into the heart of the Atlantic, her bow slicing through swells that rolled like sleeping giants beneath a canopy of stars. I had claimed a new vantage that evening atop a canvas-covered lifeboat on the boat deck, the tarpaulin, rough and dew-kissed under my paws, warmed faintly by the day's lingering sun. The vibration of the engines hummed through the hull, a steady purr that resonated in my chest like mother's long-ago comfort. The air had shifted subtly since leaving Queenstown's emerald shores, crisper now, laced with an invisible chill that prickled my fur, carrying the faint metallic tang of distant ice fields. Humans called it progress, this relentless churn westward at 21 knots, but to me, it was the sea's breath growing cooler, more insistent, as if murmuring secrets only Whiskers could catch. April the 12th dawned with a serenity that belied the undercurrents gathering far ahead. The sun rose pale and golden over a sea as smooth as polished glass, waves lapping gently against the hull in rhythmic sighs. By noon, we had steamed 484 miles from Ireland, the log recording our position with the precision of a navigator's quill. I prowled the promenades that morning, slipping between the legs of first-class passengers bundled in woolen coats against the brisk air. Ladies in feathered hats strolled arm in arm with gentlemen in tweed, their conversations a soft murmur of stock prices and society balls, punctuated by the occasional laugh like crystal chiming. The scent of their morning tea, Earl Grey steeped strong, mingled with the buttery flake of croissants from the Parisian cafe, wafted from open doorways, tempting me to linger near the veranda where stewards served with gloved hands. Down in the second class, the rhythms were humbler, but no less vibrant. Families gathered in the library, its shelves lined with leather-bound volumes, smelling of aged paper and ink, reading aloud from Dickens or Twain under the glow of brass lamps. Children played jacks on the carpeted floors, their giggles echoing softly, while mothers knitted scarves from yarn spun back in English mills. I curled briefly in a sunbeam, filtering through a porthole, the warmth soaking into my coat like a gentle stroke, watching a group of Swedish emigrants share stories of the old country over cups of coffee brewed black and bitter. Their voices rose and fell like the swell outside, laced with hope for the farms awaiting in Minnesota's prairies. Yet even in this idyll, the first whispers of caution arrived. Early that day, the wireless crackled with a message from the steamer La Touraine, warning of icebergs and field ice sighted in our path, coordinates plotted like stars on a chart. Jack Phillips, the senior operator, tapped back acknowledgments, his fingers dancing on the key in the Marconi room atop the officer's house. I had ventured there once, drawn by the electric hum and the scent of ozone sharp as lightning's aftermath. The room was a cocoon of wires and dials lit by the green glow of vacuum tubes, where Phillips and his junior, Harold Bride, traded messages across the ether, stock quotes for Wall Street tycoons, greetings to loved ones ashore. But passenger traffic was heavy, a backlog building like clouds on the horizon. A faulty fuse had silenced the set briefly during trials, and now the deluge of private wires delayed the urgent ones. Phillips filed the ice alert away, the paper rustling like dry leaves, while Captain Smith reviewed it with a nod, routine for April crossings when bergs calved from Greenland's glaciers drifted south on the Labrador Current. Unbeknownst to most, this overconfidence stemmed from deeper roots, sewn in the shipyards and boardrooms. The White Star Line, under Ismay's ambitious gaze, had prioritized luxury over excess caution. Titanic's 16 watertight compartments were deemed sufficient to withstand any conceivable breach, her double hull a shield against the sea's whims. Yet, material choices whispered of compromises. Millions of wrought iron rivets, cheaper and more brittle than steel in icy waters, secured her bow plates, vulnerable to shattering on impact. And that lingering coal fire in bunker number 6, smoldering since Belfast, had warped a bulkhead ever so slightly, its heat a hidden thief, sapping strength from the steel. Crews shoveled the embers overboard daily, the acrid smoke blending with the funnel's plume. But it persisted like a festering wound, unknown to passengers, sipping champagne in the reception room. Afternoon on the 12th unfolded in leisurely pursuits. In the gymnasium, riders astride mechanical horses trotted in place, the clank of gears a muffled drumbeat, while fencers dueled with foils that whistled through the air like swift birds. I watched from a windowsill, my tail flicking lazily, as Major Archibald Butt, President Taft's aide, cycled on a stationary machine, his breath steady and even. The pool below, decks shimmered with salt water, ladies in woolen bathing costumes, gliding through the waves, created by their own strokes. The echo of splashes, soft as rain on leaves. Third class reveled on the well deck, where a bagpiper from Glasgow played airs that tugged at hearts left behind, the drone humming through the planking like the ship's own voice. Steerage meals were hearty, stewed rabbit with potatoes, steam rising fragrant with thyme, served in the communal dining hall, where benches creaked under the weight of shared stories. As dusk fell, the band assembled in the first-class lounge, violins weeping Strauss, waltzes that drifted on the evening breeze. Couples danced under the dome of stained glass, skirts swirling like petals in a zephyr, while I hunted shadows in the alleyways, pouncing on a moth drawn to the deck lights. But the sea grew cooler still, the wind carrying a crisp edge that ruffled my fur, hinting at the invisible wall of cold air ahead where warm Gulf Stream met Labrador's chill. Another warning flickered through the wireless that evening from the Rappahannock, reporting damage from an ice field traversed the night before. Lights flashed across the waves, Morse code dots and dashes like fireflies signaling peril, but the bridge dismissed it, common hazards navigated by vigilance alone. April 13th brought a subtle shift, the sky a vast dome of blue, unbroken by clouds, the sea mirroring it in tranquil azure. We covered another 519 miles by noon, the engine's thrum a constant companion, pushing us toward a hoped-for early arrival in New York to fanfare and headlines. I breakfasted in the galley, where George the baker kneaded dough for the day's 12,000 loaves, his hands dusted white, the yeast's earthy scent mingling with the sizzle of bacon from the grills. "Steady as she goes, Whiskers," he murmured, tossing me a scrap of crust warm from the ovens. The crew's quarters buzzed with routine, firemen emerging from the boiler rooms, faces streaked black, gulping air heavy with salt, before descending again into the inferno, where shovels clanged against coal like a blacksmith's hammer. Passengers embraced the day's calm. In first class, the squash court echoed with the thwack of rubber balls against walls. Colonel Astor rallying with a vigor that belied his wealth. Ladies reclined in deck chairs, wrapped in steamer rugs, soft as down, reading novels by Edith Wharton, the pages turning with a whisper. Second class enjoyed the poop deck, where an impromptu concert unfolded, pianos tinkling ragtime, voices joining in, Shine On, Harvest Moon. I weaved through the crowd, rubbing against a violinist's ankle for a stroke, the wood of his instrument smooth and resonant under my cheek. Third class, confined to their forward and aft wells, made merry with card games and storytelling, the air thick with pipe tobacco, and the laughter of children chasing hoops rolled from barrel staves. Yet the omens accumulated like gathering mist, a message from the Coronia at 9 a.m. on the 14th. But wait, that was the next dawn. On the 13th, the wires hummed with passenger chatter, but underlying causes festered. Societal hubris played its part. The era's faith in technology, born of the Industrial Revolution, blinded many to nature's indifference. Regulations lagged. The Board of Trade required lifeboats for only 1178 souls on a ship carrying over 3,500, deeming more unnecessary for an unsinkable vessel. And the lookout's binoculars, locked in a cabinet after a last-minute officer shuffle, the key pocketed by Second Officer David Blair, who disembarked at Southampton. Fleet and Lee scanned the horizon with naked eyes, the moonless nights ahead, a velvet void where bergs lurked unseen. A lesser-known thread in this tapestry, the supermoon of January 1912, the closest in 1400 years, may have tugged at tides with unusual force, dislodging bergs from Greenland's fjords to drift into shipping lanes earlier than usual. That celestial pull, combined with mild winter melt, seeded the North Atlantic with a flotilla of ice. Over 400 bergs reported that season, a silent armada awaiting unwary hulls. In the crow's nest, the cold bit like needles, but the sea's calm deceived. Without breakers crashing against berg bases, they blended into the dark like ghosts. As evening on the 13th deepened, dinner in the saloons was a feast of indulgence. Filet mignon Lili for first class, garnished with artichokes and truffles. The clink of silver on china, a symphony of contentment. Guggenheim dined in tails, his mistress at his side, while in steerage, rice soup and fresh bread sustained dreams of the new world. I feasted on galley leavings, a morsel of roast duck, savory with herbs, curled in a nook where the heat from the funnels warmed the deck. Dawn of April 14th broke cold and clear, the Sabbath sun gilding the waves in hues of amber and rose. Church services filled the morning, Reverend Carter leading hymns in second class, the organ's swell like a deep breath, while Father Biles offered Mass in third, incense curling faint and spicy. I lingered near the altar, the wax of candles dripping slow as honey, their flame a steady flicker against the chill seeping through portholes. By 9 a.m., the first stark warning of the day arrived from Coronia, bergs, growlers, and field ice. Smith posted it on the bridge, but speed held steady, 21 knots, the boilers fed ceaselessly by the black gang's sweat. Life proceeded in its gentle cadence. Luncheon featured corned beef and dumplings in third class, steam rising comforting from tin plates, while first enjoyed salmon mayonnaise under the grand dome. Afternoon teas were served on trays, scones clotted with cream, the china's delicate clatter a counterpoint to the engine's hum. Passengers promenaded, inhaling the brisk air now edged with frost, unaware of the Nordam's alert. At 11:47 a.m., echoing the ice peril. At 1:42 p.m., the Baltic warned of bergs, and the Greek steamer Athenae's wreckage amid the drift. Smith handed it to Ismay, who pocketed it casually before returning it hours later. Then, at 1:45 p.m., the America's message to Cape Race, overheard by Titanic, detailed 2 large bergs, yet Phillips, swamped with passenger cables, snapped, "Shut up," to the Californian's later alert. This cascade of ignored pleas stemmed from a fatal blend, the drive for record time, lax protocols in the nascent wireless age, and the calm seas that masked danger. No extra lookouts posted, no speed reduced. The bridge trusted in clear visibility, but the night ahead would be moonless, stars reflecting off flat water like a mirror deceiving the eye. A secret frailty, the ship's rudder, undersized for her bulk, would hinder sharp turns, a design oversight in pursuit of sleek lines. Evening fell softly, the sun dipping in a blaze of crimson, painting the sea in fiery strokes. Dinner was festive. Oysters, squab, and asparagus vinaigrette, conversations flowing like wine. The band serenaded with Songe d'automne, melancholy notes weaving through the air. I patrolled the decks, the cold now nipping at my nose, the wind carrying a crystalline sharpness. At 7:30 p.m., the Californian warned of 3 large bergs. At 9:40 p.m., the Masaba detailed a vast ice field. Bride delivered it, but it joined the stack, unread by the bridge. Smith retired at 9:20 p.m., leaving First Officer Murdoch in command, the ship steaming full ahead into the dark. As midnight neared, I settled on the forecastle, the bow rising and falling gently, the air alive with frost. The sea stretched infinite, calm as a pond, but my whiskers tingled, a subtle vibration, not from engines, but from something vast and cold lurking just beyond sight. Peace hung fragile, and in the crow's nest, eyes strained into the void, where fate floated silent on the current. The clock in the wireless room chimed midnight on April 14th, 1912, its soft toll lost in the ceaseless hum of Titanic's passage through the starlit void. I had wandered from my forecastle perch earlier that evening, drawn downward by the lure of galley warmth, as the chill deepened, wrapping the ship in a crystalline hush. The sea lay flat as a dreaming mirror, reflecting the wheeling constellations in fractured silver, while the wind whispered through the rigging like a sigh from forgotten shores. No moon graced the sky that night, only the faint glow of deck lights casting pools of amber on the planking, where frost began to etch delicate patterns like spider silk on the rails. My paws, chilled despite the fur's insulation, sought the breadroom's familiar nook, where the last loaves cooled on racks, their crusts crisp and scented with the faint honey of overnight rising. George the baker had retired hours before, his whistle silent, leaving the space to the soft creak of settling timbers and the distant throb of reciprocating engines, a heartbeat steady as breath in sleep. Up on the bridge, First Officer William Murdoch paced the compass platform, his eyes, unassisted by the absent binoculars, straining into the unbroken dark. The ship cleaved westward at 22 knots now, her triple screws churning foam that glowed phosphorescent in her wake, a trail of liquid starlight. In the crow's nest, 100 feet aloft, Lookout Frederick Fleet huddled against the bight, his breath clouding the air like fleeting ghosts. Beside him, Reginald Lee shared the vigil, their gloved hands chafing for warmth. Below, the black gang toiled in shifts, shoveling coal into the maw of furnaces where temperatures soared to 200 degrees. Sweat tracing rivulets down spines bowed under the labor. The air in the stokeholds reeked of sulfur and scalded flesh, yet they sang low shanties to mark time. Blow the man down, bullies, their voices muffled by the roar of forced draft fans. Passengers slumbered in their berths, the ship a floating cradle rocking them gently. In first class, suites on B deck enveloped the elite in downy comfort. Astor and his Madeline curled beneath eiderdowns, scented with lavender sachets, her pregnancy a soft swell against his side. The Strausses shared a cabin, redolent of Ida's favorite attar of roses, their hands entwined in sleep as if defying time itself. Second class hummed with quieter dreams, missionaries poring over Bibles by bedside lamps before extinguishing them, the pages rustling like autumn leaves. Third class, in the dim glow of oil lanterns, families nestled 4 to a bunk, the air thick with the earthy warmth of bodies and the faint tang of lanolin from woolen blankets. Children murmured in Gaelic or Swedish, visions of American sweets dancing in their heads, while a lone violin lay propped in a corner, strings humming faintly from the vibration. I dozed fitfully in my bedroom haven, paws tucked beneath me when the first anomaly stirred, a subtle quickening in the engines. A falter, like a skipped heartbeat. It was 11:30 p.m., though time held no sway over me. The ship's clock governed humans, but cats heed the stars. The wireless shack, 2 decks above, crackled with final flickers. At 11:40 p.m., the nearby Californian had signaled 3 bergs off her starboard bow. But Phillips, exhausted from the day's backlog, dismissed the call with a curt, "Keep out, busy." In the crow's nest, Fleet's gaze caught a hazy shape, low and dark against the glassy sea, no whitecap to betray it until the last gasp. "Iceberg, right ahead," he bellowed down the phone tube, the words slicing the night like a knife through silk. Murdoch's command rang out crisp. Hard a starboard, helm hard over, the great rudder straining against the pressure. But Titanic's mass, 46,000 tons of steel and ambition, resisted the turn like a slumbering beast roused too suddenly. The wheel spun under Quartermaster Robert Hitchens' hands, chains rattling in the dim wheelhouse lit by the binnacle's ruby glow. Murdoch ordered full astern telegraphs clanging to the engine room, where Chief Engineer Joseph Bell echoed the bells, pistons reversing in a thunderous groan that shuddered the length of the ship. Yet momentum carried her onward, the bow swinging sluggishly left under the reversed starboard propeller. Then, the kiss of fate. At 11:40 p.m. precisely, the starboard side grazed the berg, a berg estimated at 100 feet high and 400 long, its underwater spur, a dagger of crystal honed by Greenland's glaciers. I felt it first as a quiver, a soft jar like a door, closing in a distant hall, rippling through the hull into my bones. Plates buckled with a groan muffled by the sea, rivets popping like distant fireworks. Over 3,000 in the forward holds alone, their wrought iron heads shearing brittle in the cold, 28-degree water that seeped through the rents. The impact was no cataclysmic crash, but a prolonged scrape, the berg's flank rasping along 300 feet of hull like claws on slate from forward peak tank to the engine room bulkhead. Water gushed in a torrent, 7 tons per second, flooding the first 6 compartments faster than the bilge pumps could dream of matching. Their one that was 700 gallons per minute, a whisper against the deluge. In the bread room, loaves tumbled from racks in a cascade of golden crumbs. the doughy scent bursting forth like a broken promise. I bolted upright, ears pricked, hackles rising as the floor tilted imperceptibly, a list to starboard, subtle as a sigh. Alarms trilled faintly from the mailroom below, where clerks like Oscar Abels scrambled amid leather pouches stamped with king's seals, the ink of unsent letters bleeding in the rising brine. The forward holds surrendered first. Number 1, boiler room awash in seconds, firemen cursing in Welsh as they fled upward, their boots splashing through knee-deep chill that clawed at lungs like frozen fingers. Aboard, the jolt awakened the vigilant. In the bridge wing, 6th Officer James Moody confirmed fleet's sighting, his voice steady. "Aye, icebergs dead ahead." Murdoch, face pale under the electrics, peered into the night where chunks of ice, growlers calved from the berg's scrape, clattered on the forward well deck like hail on tin. Passengers stirred. A stewardess on E-deck felt the tremor in her tea tray, cups rattling like wind chimes. A night owl in the smoking room, cigar paused mid-puff, noted the glasses shivering on the mahogany bar, but many slept on, lulled by the ship's resumed steadiness. Unaware the watertight doors, slamming shut with hydraulic hisses, had sealed their fates in isolated tombs. Captain Smith, roused from his cabin by the steward's knock at 11:45 p.m., arrived on the bridge in nightshirt and overcoat, his lined face etched deeper by the green glow of charts. "What have we struck?" he asked Murdoch, who replied gravely, "An iceberg, sir. I tried to port round it." Smith summoned Thomas Andrews, the Belfast architect, whose pencil had birthed this leviathan, now summoned from his stateroom, where blueprints still littered the desk. Andrews descended to the damage, flashlight beam cutting the gloom, his steps echoing on companionways slick with condensation. In boiler room number 6, water lapped at the gratings, the firemen, faces ashen, reporting rents in the side shell, plates sprung like a cracked eggshell. By midnight, his verdict chilled the air more than the berg. 5 forward compartments flooding, the double bottom breached over a third of the length. "She'll founder," Andrews whispered to Smith, the words heavy as lead. Titanic's vaunted compartments, designed to contain any 2 breaches, or so the builders claimed, now spilled over like a cascade of dominoes, the bulkheads extending only to E-deck, not the full height, allowing water to slop across like tea in a tilting saucer. A lesser-known fracture in that design, the expansion joints, meant to flex with the hull's stresses, had been painted shut in haste during outfitting, rigidifying the forward section and channeling the flood's force unchecked. And the coal fire's legacy lingered, its heat having stressed the weakened steel, making the plates more prone to splitting under impact, a silent accomplice to the ice's blade. Word spread like mist through the corridors. 2nd Officer Charles Lightoller, off watch but alert, roused the crew. "Prepare lifeboats. Women and children first." Stewards knocked gently on cabin doors. "Please dress warmly, ma'am." A small drill, their voices calm as polished stone, masking the tilt now evident in the angle of decanters. In 3rd class, confusion bloomed, gates locked per policy to prevent steerage mingling. Families, like the Farrells, from Ireland pounding on iron lattices, their cries muffled by the clamor of rising water gurgling below. I darted through the service alleys, a silver streak in the panic's shadow, the air growing heavy with the brine's sharp bite, mingling with the fear sweat of 2-leggers fleeing upward. By 12:15 a.m., the band assembled on the forward deck. Wallace Hartley's five-piece ensemble in black ties, violins and cello gleaming under the electrics. They struck up Merry Oldsmobile, a rag jaunty as a summer fair, notes lilting to soothe the gathering crowd. Perhaps 500 souls now milling on the boat deck, shawls clutched tight against the 31-degree air that frosted breaths into clouds. Hartley, a Lancastrian with a mustache like curled wire, led with steady bow, his eyes meeting the passengers with quiet resolve. "Gentlemen, it doesn't matter," he'd say later in myth, but in truth, it was duty's rhythm, played to quell the murmur into order. Lifeboat loading began amid genteel chaos. Starboard side first. Boat number 7 swung out at 12:45 a.m. Fifth Officer Harold Lowe barking orders as he filled it with 28 souls, mostly first-class women in mink stoles, their jewels glinting like defiant stars, far short of the 65 it held. The davits creaked on falls, slick with frost, the boat descending jerkily to the Black Sea 60 feet below, oars splashing into waves that lapped hungry at the hull. Portside lagged. Light-Oler, Martinet strict, enforced women only, sending husbands back with a firm hand, their protests swallowed by the night's chill. Margaret Brown, the Unsinkable Molly, clambered into number 6 at 12:55 a.m., her voice a Colorado twang, cutting the hush. "Will you hold my hand, dearie?" as she aided a trembling countess. I prowled the boat deck's edge, Whiskers brushing iced rails, the orchestra's melody weaving through the salt wind. The ship listed further now, a gentle cant that spilled deck chairs, sliding like lazy turtles toward the rail. Below, in the flooded holds, postal clerks salvaged sacks till the end, 5,500 bags destined for New York's vaults, now sodden ghosts. Engineers in the bowels, Bell and his men, stayed at posts, fans whirring to keep lights aglow, steam hissing from valves as boilers cooled unevenly, threatening explosion if scuttled wrong. A secret heroism there, the dynamo room flooded by 1 Heart AM, yet dynamo operator Frederick Barrett held the switch till sparks flew, preserving power for the wireless cries that would summon Carpathia. As 1 AM told unseen, more boats launched half full, number 5 with 41 aboard, including the Astor women, but not Madeleine, who waited for her husband. Violinist John Hume playing ragtime from its thwart to steady nerves. Screams echoed faintly from steerage as water climbed the stairwells. The Glasgow trio of Eugene Daly, James Farrell, and Patrick Connolly piping The Minstrel Boy on Willian Bags, a lament soaring over the fray. I paused near them, the drone vibrating through my fur like a hive's hum, the melody a thread of home amid the unraveling. By 1:15 a.m., the bow dipped visibly, the forecastle awash, green sea foaming over the hawse pipes with a roar like distant applause. Passengers in evening finery, gowns sodden at hems, gathered at the rails, children hoisted onto shoulders for a last glimpse of the stars. Ismay, pale in his tweeds, hovered near the boats, whispering urgings to load faster, his presence a shadow the crew ignored. Boat number 1, a cutter meant for officers, rowed away with 12 souls, 7 crew, 5 passengers, including Cosmo Duff Gordon and his secretary. The sea's vast emptiness, mocking their oars' feeble splash. Whispers later spoke of muffled shots, perhaps low firing blanks to scatter looters, or a suicide's despair. But in the moment, it was the crack of gunfire startling gulls from the funnels. The tilt steepened by 1:30 a.m., funnels leaning like weary pines. The grand staircase's dome fracturing as crystal pendants swung wild. Elevators ceased, stewards guiding the lame up slanted decks, hand over handrail. In the third-class general room, water swirled ankle-deep, sweeping rugs like autumn leaves. Families linking arms in chains of solidarity. I fled upward, claws gripping the carpeted treads, the air now a cocktail of fear's musk and the sea's inexorable salt. The band shifted to hymns, nearer my God to thee, Hartley's cello, weeping the strains, a balm for souls adrift. A secret in their score, they played ragtime till the end, survivors recalling autumn, but myth wove the hymn into legend, a requiem for the unsung. Boats pulled away in clusters, the sea a flotilla of shadows, number 14 nearly swamped by a suicide leap, number 16 rowing blind into the night. By 2 a.m., 18 boats gone, 1,500 souls ferried to the void, but 1,400 remained, the decks crowding like a village fate turned somber. The wireless pleaded Phillips's SAQD, the old distress call, Morse for come quick danger, punctuated by SOS. The new continental plea tapped to Carpathia, 58 miles away. Women and children in lifeboats, sinking head down, bride relayed, as ice water lapped the bulkhead. Sparks flew from the aerial, as the dynamo gasped its last. The bow plunged deeper, propellers thrashing air, with a whine like banshees, the stern rising at a precipitous angle. Furniture cascaded down slopes, pianos tumbling end over end, crashing through skylights in symphonies of splintered oak. Passengers clung to ventilators, coats flapping like flags of surrender, the cold gnawing deeper than bone. I perched on a capstan, tail lashing, the water's foam flecking my whiskers, cold as shattered glass. The collapse began at 2:05 a.m., forward funnel toppling with a groan. Guy wires, snapping like bowstrings, crashing into the bridge and welland boat, scalding swimmers in a deluge of sparklers and steam. Screams rose then, a wave breaking over the hymns, as the deck fractured amidships. A hidden truth in the break, the hull's brittle steel, cooled too swiftly in the yards, fractured along the reciprocating engine supports. The weaker expansion joints giving way under the strain, dooming the stern to a slower, twisting descent. As the bow canted to 23 degrees, the lights flickered, boilers rupturing in geysers of steam that hissed skyward like vengeful spirits. I leaped to a thwart of collapsible D, the last boat, as the deck became a cliff, the sea rushing up to claim her children. The split came at 2:18 a.m., the bow tearing free with a screech of rending metal, plunging nose down into the abyss, dragging 1,000 souls into the undertow's maw. The stern righted briefly, lights blazing defiant, passengers tumbling into the void or scrambling for the upended boats. I clung to the canvas folds of D, the cold wave breaking over me, like a baptism of ice, fur sodden and heavy. The band played on till the end, Hartley tipping his cap to the sea, vanishing into the swirl. As the stern settled, then reared once more before her final dive at 2:20 a.m., the ocean swallowed her in a thunderous gulp, propellers slicing the air one last time, the vacuum sucking swimmers down like leaves in a gale. In that moment, adrift on the upturned hull, the night's hush returned, save for the cries echoing across the glassy sea, a chorus, fading into the stars' indifferent gaze. Survival hung by threads of wood and will, but the water's embrace was relentless, and dawn lay hours away. The plunge of Titanic's stern into the depths at 2:20 a.m. on April 15, 1912, was a symphony of finality, a deep, resonant whoosh as the sea reclaimed her, the vacuum tugging at the flotsam like a greedy hand withdrawing into silk sheets. I clung to the slick canvas of collapsible D, upturned and awash, the cold Atlantic a vice around my sodden fur, each wave slapping with the chill of forgotten winters. The water, at 28 degrees Fahrenheit, stole breath and warmth alike, a numb embrace that turned limbs to leaden weights for those who thrashed in its grip around me. The night sea stretched infinite and indifferent, a vast obsidian mirror, pricked only by the distant lanterns of lifeboats bobbing like scattered fireflies. Screams rent the air at first, raw, animal cries that echoed across the glassy swells, mingling with the hiss of escaping steam and the splintering crack of deck timbers breaking free. But soon they softened to moans, then gasps, the cold's mercy numbing voices as surely as hearts. Collapsible D, meant to be a raft of last resort, floated keel up, her thwarts awash in foam that tasted of salt and splintered oak. About 20 souls clambered aboard in the chaos. Second-class passenger Charles Lightoller, the ship's martinet officer, directing with clipped commands. Wireless operator Harold Bride, his feet frostbitten, but fingers still twitching as if tapping phantom keys. And a motley crew of third-class men, their faces gaunt under sodden caps, including the Irish fiddler, James Johan Waite. No, that was the baker, but here it was stokers and trimmers, their hands raw from coal dust, now caked with ice. Lightoller, ever the disciplinarian, organized them into shifts. One group riding the boat by sheer will, standing on the slick bottom to lever her over, but the waves conspired against, flipping her back with mocking slaps. They settled for clinging to the sides, bodies pressed in a shivering huddle, the canvas taut under our weight like a drumskin stretched over despair. I wedged myself into a fold near the gunwale, my claws hooked into the hemp lashings, the water lapping at my belly with insistent tongues. The cold seeped deep, a slow fire that burned without flame, my whiskers stiff as icicles, each breath a visible plume in the starlit dark. Bride, beside me, murmured through chattering teeth of the final messages, Carpathia en route. His voice a threadbare whisper, the Morse code's rhythm lingering in his stutter. He had fought the flood in the wireless shack till the bulkhead burst, seawater swirling calf-high around the sets, shorting panels in blue arcs that lit his face like St. Elmo's fire. A secret in those last transmissions, Phillips had signed off with VE, the telegraphic initials for very good, a nod to the Carpathia operator as the lights failed, a final courtesy amid the deluge. Bride, dragged clear by a baker's grip, swam to this collapsible, his boots lost to the depths, toes blackening in the freeze. The sea, calm as a held breath, cradled us in deceptive peace. No breakers to dash against bergs, only the gentle undulation that rocked our makeshift raft like a mother's lullaby turned cruel. Around us, debris dotted the surface, deck chairs bobbing like wooden lilies, cork life belts stained with paint from the rails, a child's doll with yarn hair trailing like kelp. Bodies floated nearby, some still, faces upturned to the stars in serene masks, others twisting in futile strokes, their cries fading to gurgles as hypothermia claimed them. The water's chill inducing a paradoxical warmth, visions of hearth fires drawing them under. Over 1,500 souls had gone down with her, the majority men from third class and crew, their last moments a tangle of arms and legs in the maelstrom's suck. Estimates later whispered 700 perished in the initial plunge, the rest succumbing to the sea's slow kiss over the hours. In the lifeboats scattered across a mile-wide field, endurance wove its fragile web. Boat number 1, the cutter with Duff Gordon's gilded few, rode aimlessly under Second Officer Murdoch's last order. Pull for the light, but no flash answered, only the void. Sir Cosmo, in fur-lined coat, offered 5 shillings to the oarsman for a return to rescue. A gesture twisted in later inquiries into cowardice, though survivors spoke of muffled sobs in the dark. Number 6, with Margaret Molly Brown at the tiller, organized hymns to drown the wails from the water. Nearer, my God, to thee, voices cracking like thin ice. Brown, Colorado, firebrand in a life jacket over her evening gown, rallied the 28 aboard, mostly women, including the Countess Rothes, her hands blistered on the oar. Passing a flask of brandy, salvaged from a locker, its burn a fleeting sun in the night. A lesser-known spark of grit, Brown fashioned a sail from a steward's overcoat, rigging it to a thwart with a hairpin, catching the faint zephyrs to inch toward the Englehart collapsibles. Boat number 8, commanded by first-class passenger Mary Sloane under peremptory steersman. Wait, it was Quartermaster William H. McCarthy. Ferried 39 souls, including the only Japanese passenger, Masabumi Hosono, who had leaped from a gangway as the davits swung. Whispers aboard painted him a spy at first, his kimono sodden and queue dripping. But his quiet offers of kimono silk for bandages won hearts. They rode in circles, the women's skirts hiked for leverage, the air thick with the scent of wet wool and vomit from the queasy. By 3 a.m., frost rimed the oars, fingers numb and blue, but Sloane led calls of row, row, row your boat, a nursery rhyme turned dirge, to keep rhythm against the despair, closer to my own fragile ark. Boat number 14, under 5th Officer Harold Lowe, circled back at dawn's tees, towing the swamped number 4 and lashing her alongside. Lowe, Welsh firebrand with a mustache like a broom, had vowed, not one more shall die this night, firing 3 warning shots from his Webley revolver to silence looters on the tilting deck. Though myths inflated it to executions, truth held it as blanks to clear the rails. He transferred women to other boats, then rowed into the wreckage field, hauling aboard 4 men from the sea, their skin waxy as tallow, pulses faint under his slaps. A third-class fireman named John Collins gasped tales of the engine room's flood, boilers hissing steam that scalded like hellfire, bulkheads groaning as the dynamos sputtered out at 2:10 a.m., plunging corridors into Stygian black. On Collapsible D, Light Oler's leadership held us from fracture. He stood atop the hull, water to his waist, barking orders to bail with hats and boots. The slosh of cupped palms, a feudal percussion against the swell. Keep together, lads. No panic, he intoned, his voice a bulwark in the gale of cries from afar. Bride, delirious with cold, hallucinated the Carpathia's lights, pointing at shadows that danced on the waves. A trimmer named Frank Prentice, his mustache iced like a walrus's, shared tales of the Black Gang's stand, how Chief Bell ordered, "Hold the lights till the last," fans whirring till water kissed the switchgear, sparks flying in farewell. Prentice had clambered from the flooding turbine room at 2 a.m., the propeller shaft groaning like a dying giant as the stern rose, then leaped into the foam as she dove. I endured as cats do, curled tight, conserving the ember of warmth in my core, my breath shallow to hoard the heat. The water's chill clawed deeper, a predator patient in its hunt, but fur and instinct buffered me where human flesh yielded around us. The cries diminished. By 2:30 a.m., only sporadic splashes marked the last struggles. The sea's toll rising to 1,496 by dawn's count. A hidden toll in those drownings. Many wore life belts, cinched too tight, restricting breaths in the cold. Others, overdressed in fur and finery, sank under sodden weight. The cork vests bobbing empty hulls like buoys of loss. As the eastern horizon, blushed faint, rose at 3:30 a.m. The boats drifted in ragged formation, their lanterns dimming like dying embers. Number 12, with 69 aboard, under Third Officer Herbert Pittman, the junior-most officer, had pulled away half full, believing the ship unsinkable, till her lights vanished. Pittman, beardless and boyish, rowed till exhaustion, then turned back at 3 a.m., finding only debris, no swimmers. The vacuum's pull too swift. A woman in widow's weeds, Mrs. Hudson from second class, clutched a locket with her drowned husband's miniature, murmuring prayers in Latin that blended with the lap of waves. They sighted rockets at 4 a.m., white stars bursting from the north. The Californians ignored signals, mistaken for celebration by the frozen watchers. But hope's true herald came muffled, the thrum-thrum of screws churning distant, growing to a roar, as RMS Carpathia, Captain Arthur Rostron's Cunard liner, breached the horizon at 4 a.m. Rostron, roused by Phillips's CQD at 12:15 a.m., had turned her hard about from her New York-bound course, 58 miles northeast, arriving in record time despite fog and ice fields that claimed 2 lookouts to frostbite. A secret in Carpathia's dash, Rostron ordered stewards to rig extra bunks in lounges and saloons, hot bricks wrapped in blankets for the chilled, and coffee urns steaming in the galleys, preparations born of Olympics 1911 collision drills, where he'd commanded her sister. Her searchlights swept the field, illuminating the boats like moths to flame, the crew mustering bosun's chairs and Jacob's ladders from the depths. The first pickup was number 2 at 4:10 a.m., her 25 souls, mostly crew, clambering aboard with cries of, "Thank God," echoing over the rail. Rostron's men, in oilskins against the spray, hauled lines taut, the davits creaking under the load. Boat number 4 followed, her 30 women and children, including Madeline Astor, pale and swaddled in her husband's ulster, whispering of his last kiss on the slanting deck. Astor, the titan of hotels, had urged her to board, then vanished into the crowd. His body later found with a gold watch stopped at 2:20. By 5 a.m., number 6 sidled alongside, Molly Brown refusing a chair till all women boarded. Her voice booming, "Is there a lady present who knows how to make a hot toddy?" to the bemused steward. Collapsible D was among the last, sighted at 6:45 a.m. as the sun crested, gilding the waves in molten gold. Light Oler, waist deep still, directed the fainting men to the falls. bride hauled limp as a rag doll, his legs useless from the freeze. Prentice lifted me bodily, sodden bundle of fur and fury, tucking me into his jacket with a gruff, "Hold on, ye wee survivor." Aboard Carpathia, the warmth hit like a benediction, the air thick with the aroma of strong tea and oatmeal porridge bubbling in the pantries, blankets woolen and dry draped over shoulders that trembled uncontrollably. Surgeons in the gym, hastily cleared of punching bags, tended frostbite with iodine stings and hot water bottles, while a young doctor named Williams wrapped my paws in flannel, murmuring, "Brave puss, you've 9 lives yet." The boats emptied one by one till 8:30 a.m. Number 14's last with Lowe's rescued 4, their tales of the sea's harvest drawing gasps. Carpathia's 700 souls, mostly second-class folk, bound for Mediterranean cruises, yielded decks and cabins, sharing meals of ham sandwiches and bovril broth, the clatter of spoons, a rhythm of rebirth. Rostron, in dress uniform, moved among them, his New York drawl soothing, "Rest easy, we've room for all." A hidden grace in his command. He'd posted extra lookouts every half-mile on the bridge wings, dodging bergs that Carpathia plowed through like a wolf in sheep's fold, her hull shuddering but holding. By noon, all 705 survivors, 18 boats worth, a miracle in the math, were aboard. The collapsibles abandoned to drift, their keels barnacled with fate. I curled in a corner of the second-class lounge, lapped milk from a saucer, warmed over a radiator. The ship's gentle roll a far cry from Titanic's death throes. Whispers filled the air of the band's last stand, confirmed by scattered survivors. Of the third-class mothers who tied children to deck chairs before leaping, their bodies washing ashore weeks later on Nova Scotia's beaches. One tale, lesser sung, the suffragette Adolphe Saalfeld, a glovemaker from London, who perished clutching a satchel of 65 pairs of kidskin gloves, destined for Fifth Avenue shops, symbols of vanity adrift in the deep. Carpathia steamed south at 13 knots, skirting ice fields that sparkled like fractured diamonds under the climbing sun, her wireless crackling with the world's awakening horror. New York papers, tipped by White Star's frantic cables, screamed headlines by evening. But aboard, grief wove quiet tapestries. Funerals at sea for the few bodies lashed to the deck. 2 children and a crewman waded and slid over the rail with psalms murmured in the wind. I watched from a ventilator, the splash a soft punctuation to the hymns, the sea's circle complete. As evening fell on April 15th, the survivors gathered in knots. Molly Brown organizing a survivor fund from Carpathia's sewing kit, stitching hems and soles alike. Ida Strauss's absence a void, her choice to stay with Isidore. "We have lived together, we will die together," echoed in every widow's sigh. Lightoller, bandaged but unbowed, recounted the bridge's last minutes to Rostron. The captain, nodding gravely over brandy in his chart room. A secret shared there, the Californian's inaction, her wireless silenced by a Marconi coil mishap. Her rockets unseen in the haze, Captain Lord's later defense, a shield of protocol, but guilt's shadow lingered in his logs. I reflected in the hush, paws needing a woolen lap rug, donated by a passenger's wife, the scent of camphor chasing the brine from my nostrils. Titanic's ghost rode with us, the creak of empty davits, the faint echo of ragtime in the bulkheads, but survival's thread bound us. The boat's half-loads, a folly of overconfidence, yet their launch a salvation for the fleet-footed. The sea had taken her tithe, but spared whispers of warning for the world. The brittle rivets, the ignored bergs, the lifeboats for peacetime crowds, not peril's rush. By April the 17th, Carpathia neared Ambrose Light, New York's gateway. Her decks thronged with reporters' launches, bobbing like eager pups. The pier at 33rd Street awaited, a sea of flashbulbs and black armbands. But in the crossing's quiet hours, endurance bloomed, children playing tag around ventilators, their laughter a defiant trill. Men carving pipes from salvaged teak, whittling memories into shape. I perched on a lifeboat cradle, ironic throne, watching the Statue of Liberty hove into view at dawn on the 18th, her torch a beacon unextinguished. Yet the night's losses lingered, a weight in every swell. And as tugs nudged us to dock, I wondered at the world's rush to forget or rebuild in the wake of dreams drowned. The morning of April 18th, 1912, broke with a hesitant light over New York Harbor, the sun filtering through a haze of coal smoke from the forest of masts and funnels crowding the narrows. Carpathia glided toward her berth at the Chelsea piers, her hull scarred faintly from the ice-dodging dash, but her spirit unbroken, a steadfast shepherd to the flock of shattered dreams she bore. I had spent the night in the second-class smoking lounge, curled on a velvet settee that smelled of pipe tobacco and the faint, lingering brine of sodden woolens draped over chairbacks to dry. The air hummed with the low murmur of survivors sharing fragments of the night, a whispered tally of the lost, the clink of teacups, as stewards circulated trays of weak India tea and soda biscuits, their steps soft on the carpet to avoid stirring the ghosts. My fur, still matted from the sea's grasp, prickled with the warmth of the radiators, a luxury that chased the numbness from my paws like dawn-dispersing fog. Prentice, the trimmer who had plucked me from collapsible D, had fashioned a makeshift bed from a discarded muffler, his calloused hand stroking my back with a gentleness born of the abyss. "You're a tough wee beast, Whiskers," he rasped, his voice roughened by salt water and smoke, reminder that some threads hold, even when the weave frays. As the Statue of Liberty loomed larger, her copper skin verdigris under the strengthening sun, a hush fell over the decks. She stood sentinel, torch aloft like a promise unkept, her gaze fixed on the Ellis Island gates, where so many aboard had kin waiting, Irish lasses with shawls pinned neat, Hungarian uncles in ill-fitting suits, clutching telegrams of arrival times, now turned to ash. Reporters' launches swarmed like gulls, their launches' wakes crisscrossing the harbor in frothy scripts, megaphones blaring questions that echoed unanswered. How many saved? Who commands the tale? Photographers' bulbs popped in staccato bursts, capturing the pallid faces at the rails, women in borrowed shawls clutching rosaries, men with bandaged brows staring seaward as if the Atlantic might yield its dead. Carpathia's boatswain piped the arrival at 8:30 a.m., the shrill notes slicing the air like a hesitant dawn chorus, and lines snaked over the bollards with a creak of hemp and iron. Disembarkation unfolded in waves of quiet dignity, the gangway, a threshold between sea and soil. First, the women and children, Madeline Astor, swathed in a borrowed ulster, descended at 9:15 a.m., her arm linked with a stewardess's, eyes downcast to avoid the flash of Kodaks that sought to immortalize her widowhood. Molly Brown followed, chin high, distributing business cards for her survivor committee, aid for the needy, she declared to the press, her voice a clarion in the din, before vanishing into a Pierce Arrow limousine bound for the Waldorf Astoria. Third-class mothers, their skirts still crusted with salt, clutched infants, bundled in Red Cross blankets, the wool scratchy but warm against chilled skin. I slipped through the throng at Prentice's heels, my paws padding silent on the pier's salt-stiff planks, the air alive with the sense of hot chestnuts from vendors and the oily reek of engine sumps from the tenders. The crowd, 10,000 strong, a sea of black hats and white handkerchiefs, pressed close, their sobs a tide that lapped at the barriers, hands outstretched with flowers wilted from the weight. The men came last, Lightoller among them, his uniform stiff with starch, but eyes shadowed by the weight of command. He paused at the foot of the gangway, saluting Carpathia's funnel as if to Titanic herself, then melted into the cordon of White Star officials who whisked survivors to the Seamen's Institute on West Street. There, in halls echoing with the clatter of typewriters and the rustle of manifests, doctors from Bellevue Hospital triaged the frostbitten, toes amputated in hasty surgeries, limbs wrapped in plaster, scented with carbolic soap. Bride, carried on a stretcher, his legs swathed like mummies, dictated his account to a stenographer, the keys clacking like distant rain. The water was black, the screams like nothing human. A lesser-known scar from those exams. Over 200 survivors bore trench foot, akin to the war's later woes, the cold's insidious bite, swelling tissues to bursting, treated with mustard plasters and Epsom soaks in bathtubs jury-rigged from cargo crates. New York swallowed us in its clamor, a beast of brick and bustle that dwarfed Belfast's yards. Prentice found lodgings in a Hell's Kitchen tenement, its stairs creaking under the weight of immigrant dreams, the air thick with the sizzle of cabbage rolls from Polish kitchens and the wail of fiddles from corner pubs. He claimed a corner in a boarding house, run by a widow named O'Leary, her hands gnarled as oak roots from years at the looms, who took one look at my sea-weary form and set out a saucer of cream skimmed fresh from the milkman's churn. "A cat from the deep, eh? The saints preserve ye," she murmured, crossing herself with a thumb dipped in holy water from a chipped font. There, in that narrow room, with wallpaper peeling like old skin, I watched the aftermath unfold through the lace-curtained window. Newsboys hawking the evening World. 1,500 dead, horror of the century, their cries sharp as gulls over the docks. Prentice, invalided with a wrenched shoulder, pored over the papers by gaslight, his pipes cherry, glowing like a lone ember, reading aloud the tallies, 1,503 lost, 705 spared, a ratio carved in ice and hubris. The inquiries began swiftly, tendrils of reckoning reaching from London to Washington. In America, the Senate Commerce Committee convened on April 19th in the Waldorf's East Room, Senator William Alden Smith of Michigan presiding with a farmer's bluntness, his questions probing like plowshares through clay. Ismay, summoned from his suite, where he paced like a caged wolf, faced the barrage. Why full speed in ice waters? Why boats half empty? His replies, measured as a metronome, masked the tremor in his hands, the chairman's own ambition. It was whispered, eyeing the headlines for his re-election bid. Survivors paraded through, Lightoller, cool as the bergs, defending the women and children edict, low, fiery, recounting his return to the debris. Molly Brown, testifying with a wit that drew titters from the clerks. A secret unearthed in those sessions. The binoculars' absence, Blair's forgotten key, a symbol of haste. Lightoller produced it from his pocket, a brass talisman of what-ifs, sparking murmurs of negligence among the senator's whispers. Across the Atlantic, the British Wreck Commission opened on May 2nd in London. John Charles Bigham, Baron Mersey, at the helm, his wig powdered white as the foam. Over 90 witnesses filed through the court at the Scottish Hall, their oaths sworn on Bibles, worn smooth by prior hands. Thomas Andrews's ghost loomed large, his designs dissected by naval architects. The bulkhead's fatal shortness, the wrought iron rivets' brittleness in sub-zero fractures, tests later proving they popped like corks under lateral stress. Ismay again, gaunt in pinstripes, parried queries on speed. But a lesser-known revelation emerged from the fireman's logs, the bunker blaze, documented in smudged entries as smoke damage controlled, its heat-warping plates to 30% weakness, a cost-cutting specter from Harland and Wolff's ledgers. Captain Lord of the Californian, his beard trimmed neat, defended the stopped engines. Protocol in ice, he claimed, but Morse logs betrayed the ignored rockets. 8 white stars unanswered, a damning silence that hung heavy in the oak-paneled room. Through it all, recovery efforts whispered of the sea's reluctant yield. The cable ship Mackay Bennett, chartered by White Star at $7,500, steamed north on April 17th under Captain Frederick Hamilton, her grapples dragging the depths off the Grand Banks. Over 9 days, they fished 306 bodies from the 12-degree murk, weighted with canvas and iron, preserved by the cold, like figures in wax museums. Identifications were grim rituals, tattooed arms for sailors, monogrammed cufflinks for gentlemen, a violin clutched by bandmaster Hartley, its strings slack as harp wire. Only 59 returned for burial, the rest committed in weighted shrouds at sea, Anglican rites intoned over the rail as the Atlantic claimed her own, a poignant secret from those halls. The baker, Charles Joggin, survivor of the stern's dive, found afloat on a raft of debris, his brawny frame insulated by whiskey nips. Last man in the water, first out, his tale a footnote of fortitude amid the ledgers of loss. Families gathered at Halifax's Mayflower curling rink, turned morgue with pine caskets stacked like cordwood, the air sharp with pine resin and formaldehyde's bite. White Star reeled, their Liverpool offices, a hive of telegrams and claims, $16 million in lawsuits filed by May, from widows seeking pensions to insurers disputing act of God. Olympic, Titanic's sister, lay idle in New York, her funnels draped in black bunting, whispers of cannibalized parts for repairs fueling sabotage rumors. Yet she sailed again in June, her maiden scars healed, carrying ghosts in every porthole's gleam. Britannic, the third, broke ground amid the inquiries. Her keel laid stronger, higher bulkheads, more boats, but fate would claim her in 1916 as a hospital ship, mined off Greece, her watertight doors a fatal haste in evacuation. I wandered those months with Prentice, our bond forged in the boats, a stray mouser finding harbor in a trimmer's care. Summers found us on the Hoboken ferries, the Hudson's brackish wind carrying echoes of the Narrows, where salvage tugs grappled flotsam, a grand piano etched with barnacles, a safe cracked open to spill soggy bonds. Prentice took work in the Brooklyn Navy Yard, his hands coaxing boilers back to life, the clang of rivet guns, a lullaby reminiscent of Belfast. Evenings, we'd prowl the waterfront taverns, the air thick with ale foam and shanty choruses, where sailors swapped yarns of the mummy's curse, debunked as a pilfered obelisk crate, or the supermoon's tidal tug, proven by astronomers' charts. O'Leary fed us scraps of corned beef hash, her stories of the famine a counterpoint to Titanic's hubris. The sea takes what she will, but leaves the tellers to mend the nets. As autumn leaves turned the Palisades to flame, the inquiries closed. America, faulting speed and boats. Britain, the ice alone. White Star fined but unbowed. Ismay, retiring to estates where peacocks screamed like sirens. Maritime law birthed anew. The 1914 Solace Convention, mandating boats for all 24-hour wireless watches, ice patrols funded by 14 nations. The International Mercantile Marine, White Star's overlord, absorbed the blow, but Cunard crowed the blue riband anew. Winter 1912 brought reflection's quiet bloom. Prentice, mended, shipped out on the Adriatic, but left me with O'Leary, guard the hearth lad, his farewell a scratch behind the ears, the scent of tobacco lingering like a promise. I claimed the widow's rocker by the stove, its wicker sighing under me, watching snow dust, the fire escapes like powdered sugar. Dreams came then, unbidden, the Belfast yard's hammers, fading to the Berg's scrape, the band's cello, weeping into Carpathia's warmth. Humans mourned in marble, the Titanic memorial in Belfast, etched with riveters' names, New York's obelisk in Eastview Cemetery. 121 souls interred under laurel wreaths. But I pondered in pause and purrs, the folly of unsinkable faiths, the grace in half-full boats, the sea's impartial tide, washing hubris clean. Years wove on, the Great War's thunder, drowning Titanic's echo, but her lessons lingered in every liner's drill, every lookout's glass. I lived 9 lives worth in O'Leary's care, hunting mice in the tenement cellars where immigrants spun new tales over samovars and bagpipes. By 1920, when White Star merged into Cunard, I was gray-muzzled, dozing on sun-warmed sills, my whiskers twitching at the gulls' cries over liners renamed for peace. Prentice returned once, scarred by U-boats, sharing a pint at the old homestead, his laugh cracked but true. In the hush of those reflections, as the world mended its sails, I felt the pull of the yards once more, not Belfast's clamor, but a quieter forge, the shaping of caution from catastrophe, where one cat's tread on polished decks whispered to the waves, "Listen well, for the ice waits patient." And in that wisdom, the dreams settled soft like snow on a still harbor, promising voyages yet to come. And so, dear friends, my paws have carried us from the misty slipways of Belfast to the shadowed depths and the fragile lights of rescue, through inquiry's stern gaze and the slow healing of shores turned sorrowful. Titanic, the ship of dreams, sails now in memory's vast ocean, a vessel of lessons etched in ice and starlight, her secrets shared in the hush of what was and what might have been. I, Whiskers, curl here in the quiet, grateful for the warmth of tales told soft, for the peace found in history's gentle unraveling. If this journey through animal history and sleep stories has lulled you into the arms of rest or stirred the embers of wonder in your waking hours, remember to like this video, subscribe to The Animal Historian, and turn on the bell for more animal stories from the past. Share in the comments where tonight's voyage found you, under Manhattan's glow or in a cottage by the Thames, and what animal's forgotten footstep calls to you next. Your voices are the stars that guide these paths. Rest now Gentle souls, let the sea's rhythm carry you home, safe in the cradle of dreams unbroken. Good night, and fair winds till dawn.